Hello, Grumpy Old Fart here. Um, this is going to be kind of an odd video. Those of you who know me know I'm not a fan of big government, and there's a reason for it. Big government tends to run people's lives, and I don't like that. Liberty-minded people don't like that. Small government is better. In one of my videos, I listed the responsibilities of our government, and it ain't a whole hell of a lot of them. According to the U.S. Constitution, there's not a lot. I'm just saying. Government is like fire, small and controlled. It's very useful. Heat your house, cook your food. Big and out of control, people get hurt. Same thing. Now, this video deals with a touchy subject, and I don't want to put people off, but it's something that needs to be addressed. There was an incident that happened, and it's indicative. I'll talk about it here in a minute. It's indicative of our society. There are people in our society, a great many people, a large percentage of our society, who blindly follow instructions. If it comes from somebody that they perceive as an authority figure, a scientist, a doctor, a lawyer, a cop, whatever, and then they blindly follow these instructions. And they shouldn't. Your common sense should dictate your morals and your actions. Let me tell you, give you a bit of information here, some context. It was a number of events that happened. This one here was indicative of what happened. This is a true story. There was an incident in Kentucky at a McDonald's. A teenage worker, an individual called this place, claiming to be a police officer, said they'd had a complaint about a teenage worker at the front desk. Said this girl stole money out of his wallet when he put it on the counter. Like, lots of money. And so the manager took the girl in the back to talk to her. And on the phone, this individual claiming to be a cop convinced this manager to search her and then to strip search her. So you've got this teenage girl naked in the back room wearing an apron that barely covered everything. Barely, if that. She was left in this back room for hours while the business went on and the manager went and did her thing. The guy on the phone said this worker couldn't be left alone, so she had different people back there with her. And over the course of these several hours, this individual on the phone was giving instructions, and these people followed it blindly. This poor girl was subjected to all kinds of humiliating and disgusting things. She was spanked. She had to perform a sex act. I mean, it was disgusting what they had this kid doing. And this all happened because the person on the phone said he was a cop. What finally happened was they had an old man working there who did, I think he did like landscaping and clean the outside parking lots. And I think he was a door greeter, stuff like that. He was an old retired guy. And they had him back there watching. And the guy, he got to the phone, and this guy told him to do some stuff. And he said, "What? I'm not going to do that. This is asinine. Who's this?" And the guy hung up. By that point, though, the damage had been done. And this wasn't an isolated incident. These people abused this child because somebody who claimed to be a cop said so. This wasn't an isolated incident. This happened over 60 other times at different places. This is serious stuff. Okay? Excuse me. There is an event, this man, Stanley Milgram, he performed some very controversial experiments. I want to say this was back in the 50s or 60s. What he would do is he had two people. One was designated the teacher, one was designated the student. And they were in different rooms and they had some equipment set up. This teacher was told to instruct the student via intercom that, of certain, one word and another word, pairs of words. So when the teacher said one word, the student was supposed to answer this other word. Well, it turns out the student wasn't the one being tested, it was the teacher. And the student was an actor involved in the experiment. He knew about it. When the teacher got a wrong answer, he was supposed to hit this button, which would deliver a small electrical shock to the student. Well, the student obviously wasn't hooked up to it, but for each wrong answer, the voltage was increased a little bit. And it went all the way up to 450 volts. I mean, it's a very painful shock. So when this teacher would ask a question and the student would get it wrong, boom, he'd shock him. All this on the word of a guy in a white lab coat who said he was a doctor for an experiment. Okay? The halfway point was about 300 volts. 65%. Oh, let's go back to this. At 315 volts, at 300 volts, rather, the student was pounding on the door and crying out in pain, refusing to answer. At 315 volts, the pounding continued. I mean, louder, begging for help, that kind of thing. 65% of the teachers made it up to 300 volts, delivering this 300 volt shock. Let me rephrase that. 100% of them made it up to the 300 volts. 65% of them actually made it up to the maximum of 450, even though the person on the other end, on the other side, is pounding on the door begging for help. 100% of them made it to 300 volts. 65% of them made it all the way up to the maximum. Because some guy in a white lab coat said, this is part of an experiment, this is what you got to do. And they did it. They shocked those poor people. Now, obviously it wasn't real, but they were willing to do it. That's the state of brainwashing in our society. And this was back in the 50s and 60s. Okay? People say, well, that couldn't happen to me. You don't know what you're going to do until you're faced with it. It's just the way it is. Okay? But it's startling. Let me remind somebody. There's a man named Adolf Eichmann. This guy was on trial at the end of World War II for his involvement in the Jewish Holocaust. You know what his defense was? I was only following orders. Somebody ordered him to slaughter people, so he did it. This explains how ordinary people could send millions of people to the death camps in World War II. People say, well, that couldn't happen today. It could happen anytime. Period. And it could happen in any society. Period. People, we have to stop blindly following what people say. If you're listening to the news and you're believing every damn word they say, you're being brainwashed. And I'm not talking about just the leftist news. I'm talking about any news. Take what they say and do your own research. Research everyone. MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, all of it. Because you never know when they're lying to you. Okay? Just because somebody has an air of authority doesn't mean they're good. Doesn't mean they need to be followed blindly. Adolf Hitler was elected. There was some blood, but he didn't take power through a military coup. The German people were so desperate, they elected him. And that man was personally responsible for the slaughter of between 7 and 13, maybe up to 20 million people. And that's not counting the soldiers on the battlefield in World War II. That's just them rounding up innocent civilians and slaughtering them in the Holocaust. Okay? Under the color of authority. Use your common sense, people. If somebody's ordering you to hurt someone, Try to figure out why. Even if it's for a scientific experiment, or, if somebody calls you on the phone and says they're a cop, you know what? Hey, come on down here. I'm right here. This is my address. Come and talk to me. Bring your identification. Okay? Don't just follow it blindly. This kid in Kentucky and more than 60 other incidents happened, and these kids were traumatized for this. Little kids, teenagers. Okay? I just boggles my mind how brainwashed our society is. And if a person is a cop or somebody actually in authority and they give you an order, you're human. You have a brain. You don't have to follow that order. Now, obviously if it's a good order, that's fine, but use your common sense, people. Okay? Just because somebody says they're in authority or has a badge, you don't have to blindly follow what they say. You folks have a good day. God bless one and all.